Hi, this is Ximena Valle, and you're watching A Student's Perspective.
Hi guys, my name is Natalia, and today I am here with Ximena Valle, and today we are going to be talking about her and her many roles and titles that she has as founder, principal, lead AP of 15 Architecture and Design, and also her many roles such as adjunct professor at Temple University. It's very exciting to have you here with us today. I'm very excited to talk to you.
Thank you, Natalia. Thank you so much for having me.
It's my pleasure. So today we'll be discussing about your firm's design ideologies and how you became the designer you are today, about hearing about where you got educated. So let's start there. Where was your undergrad?
Perfect. So I went to University of Florida in Gainesville, Florida. So I am a Gator. That's where that's where I obtained my 4-year bachelor's in design.
Very, very nice. And then I see that you also had a minor as well in business.
That's correct. Yes, always an interest.
Which I find is very helpful for architecture students to take is business. They don't necessarily tell you that, or I'm not sure if they told you when you went to school, but it's definitely a hidden gem to learn about business if you're going into architecture and design.
100%.
Yeah. What in you decided to go for that minor? Did you realize that you wanted to open up your own business?
No, I really didn't at that point. But I think it was my own sense that in life, generally, having a good business sense was probably a good idea. Yeah. Growing up, my mother owned a boutique, and I think it just gave me the sense that, having that minor was probably a good idea.
Right. That's awesome to hear. So what was one of your favorite moments that you had as an undergrad, speaking in terms of design school?
So UF had a really interesting program in that we were buried, in the depths of Florida, but we had access to cities like Savannah, Georgia, Charleston, North Carolina, and through the program, we visited those cities for studios, and then finally we visited New York City, which was where, coincidentally, I was born in New York City, in Manhattan, New York. I grew up in Chile, but because of my father's travels, I was born in New York. So I had this great, desire to go back to New York.
Come full circle in a sense.
Yeah, and so U.S. program made it very clear that traveling and seeing different cities and understanding the site of your intervention was really important, and that really stuck with me. So always thinking about where a project is and the people that are going to use it, and make it truly site specific to a set of requirements. Specific, even if it's within the same city, just a specific neighborhood, and the importance of that was something I really took away from that program.
Being very site specific is something I took away a lot from in design school. It really kind of set up guidelines for your project in a sense. If you kind of just let the site talk to you, all your questions are kind of answered in that. We don't realize that the answers are in front of us, but we can kind of create something out of what's there, whether that be through thinking how we would design that project.
I love the way you said that, Natalia. I think let the site speak to you with a lesson I learned early on, and just being there, being present at the site and like really understanding it. And sometimes in my practice now, like we don't always have access to the site, but doing that work at least remotely, or like even watching videos about that site, again, just trying to be as connected to that site as possible is something that I also teach my students about now.
Right. So something that stood out to me, I went to school in Scranton, Pennsylvania. So I'm a recent graduate of, I got a bachelor's in interior architecture. So the way Marywood's curriculum is set up, it's interesting in the fact that they keep us together, both the interior architects and the people who are going to be moving on to architecture are kind of second semesters, and then also share a first semester in our second year. And it is after our second semester of second year is when we split up into our individual niches. So I really appreciated that, and the fact that I got a really good solid foundation in both the details that pertain to interiors, but structurally and environmentally as well. Or, speaking about urban landscapes and the studies and mappings of all of that kind of interlace the two, which is kind of interesting, which I was really excited to talk to you about, because you are and your firm are kind of known to cross-relate things. Mm-hmm. And we'll definitely get into that. But you also had a master's as well. Do you want to tell me a little bit about your master's studies?
Sure. So I think that ties back to my earlier comment. So I was definitely with my mindset on moving north when I was, upon graduating from UF. And so I applied to 3 schools, all in the Northeast. I visited the schools. I think that's actually really important, when you're thinking about graduate school, students are thinking about graduate school, just visiting the place, talking about site, kind of fell in love with UPenn. And so it was a beautiful, like Philly blue day that probably helped in the fall, and the campus was, showing off. I liked very much the program talked about the mixing of digital and analog, which at the time when I was looking for graduate school, so that was 2004, that was really important to me to find that kind of hybrid, because Florida was very much like hands-on model making, drawing, everything by hand. And I knew that I wanted to bring that to a place where there was a deep interest in also, the digital aspects of the practice.
Right, kind of like the next level to your skills. You've had all the foundational set, but now moving into, especially like today's society, technology is being pushed so much further into everything that we do in our lives. So that was definitely a very smart move on your end. Where did you grab inspiration from, in undergrad or in your master's, or when you were in school? And how has your inspiration changed over the years? How have you grabbed it from other places?
Mm-hmm. It's a fun question.
Yeah.
and I think we like to tackle projects in a similar way in our office now too, which is, as a new program comes to us, and this was true at school, I really like to start with research. And so the inspiration really came from research, to the point where, I just couldn't like sit still in a room and be like, let the idea come. I really needed, it was a mixture of research and making. And so a lot of times for me, it was about whatever the program was, like learning more about the program, or others who've maybe investigated that program, whether it be by philosophy or, researchers looking at that work, and then starting to make things inspired by that. And whether it be, I'm always a big fan of just, a good old sheet of Bristol paper, and some, watercolors, or X-Acto knives. Actually, I cut things a lot. And then yeah, I really do. X-Acto knife and Bristol paper is pretty much all I need. And then whatever the topic is at hand, just diving deep into it. Again, like letting the site really speak to you, the program speak to you. That's really where I drew my inspiration from.
Right. Nice. You got it all from, exactly. You didn't need much, because all the answers were either already there. It was just a matter about finding it, or how you go about finding it.
Exactly. The project itself kind of brings its set of complexity, and I find that set of variables in a different arrangement each time, like really inspiring. That's what keeps me excited about architecture and interior, exterior. and art in general. It's just that you always have a new set of variables to work with, and so it's a new problem.
So I find that you can do something, you can approach something the same way, but have different outcomes in different situations.
Totally.
Right. So how do you inspire your students today, now looking back at the way you used to take inspiration? How do you encourage them to get inspired?
You know what, maybe I can't help it, but it is in a similar way. So I always expose them to a lot of resources up front so that they can start to find what is going to be interesting to them and what are they going to research. One thing that I really enjoy doing with my students, and I think students have found they enjoy it as well, is very early on in a project, I do a kind of speed thinking charrette, and we just like everybody, in a room, papers, pens, and we do an exercise. It's like, in 5 minutes, write down all the words in your head. Like I present a lot of information to them, and then first 5 minutes, write down words that come to mind, make some sketches that come to mind, cut some paper that come to mind, and we do this for about an hour. And I think that students find that very liberating. So it's not about, thinking about what you're going to make for 10 days. It's actually about thinking and making on the spot.
Wow. Yeah, that puts people in a total different comfort zone. And I think that pushes out different ideas and different situations and outcomes. So it's always fun to study. Do you teach first? Do you mind asking what level of architecture you study? You teach, or for your adjunct?
The entire gamut, undergraduate and graduate. So I've been teaching the summer studios for the last few years, and what I love about that is it's usually either a blend of like a vertical blend of third and fourth years, or graduate level first and second. But beyond that, I spent a year teaching the capstone studio, and then I started my teaching career teaching foundation studios. Just last year I taught first year, so I think I've covered them all.
Wow. So what kind of differences do you see when approaching these different level of architecture students? Do you see them carrying what they've learned throughout the years? Do you see them all reacting at different levels to certain educational tips?
I need to think about that one a little.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
I think, it really depends on the student. And so I'm teaching at Temple. I've been teaching at Temple for some time, and we get a nice variety of students. And sometimes we get transfer students who come from a different background, and maybe they're slightly older students, exposed to various things. I think we have some students who've been, entirely in the Temple curriculum, which is a little bit easier to kind of predict, where are they coming from, what are their skills. But generally, what I think makes me a reasonably good professor is that I'm able to come to a student at whatever level they're at, and kind of understand where they're coming from, what their interests are. So that's really important to me. I don't want to force my interests on them. And then meet them at a place where they can get even better than they are, like in a semester's time, we've made progress. And so it's hard to say. I enjoy every one of those levels. I thought first year was the most challenging, but I definitely enjoy all of them.
And I could agree in the fact that first year is the most challenging, and the fact that you're trying to break their preconceived notions of what architecture already is. Like you said, I feel like some people don't think about architecture school going into cutting and folding, that first year could be a shock to them,
Right.
Like, oh, where are my skyscrapers? But instead I'm doing arts and crafts. But I think your very well-versed background helps you come to all those different individuals at that same level. Because again, we're applying those same basic skills of design thinking, like the design process is what you're trying to teach.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Correct. So I guess moving into nowadays, how do you trying to inspire kids change now through COVID and digital learning?
Yes, certainly a challenge, I will say. I've taught, I guess it's been a year and a half, I think, since we went fully virtual at Temple. Yeah. It's a challenge. We've been using the tools that are available to us So Miro, Mural have been actually really helpful, I think, in terms of having, one thing I didn't want to give up is that in my studios, I really ask students to pin up their work often in front of each other. In undergraduate, that's something we did at Florida all the time. We always pinned up, and whether your project was discussed or not, you're learning from your peers and what they were able to bring forward. In graduate school, it was really strange. We all of a sudden, it was like individual critiques, your one-on-one meeting with a professor, and we weren't really seeing each other's progress. And this is probably, I'm sure, a unique experience I had. But I really missed that, seeing what others are doing and being inspired by others. And, there has to be a certain amount of dialogue and understanding what your classmates are doing that helps the entire class move forward together, regardless of where your starting point was. So in the digital world, I wanted to make sure we were still able to do that. And so still starting most sessions with a kind of pin-up wall, right, where we just kind of looked around, was really important. And although I think students sometimes lamented at having to, listen to other people's critiques, I think in the end, it actually kept us all, active and involved. Similarly, like every time I log on to class, and I'm sure it's tedious, but every single time I ask everybody, one by one, say hi, check in, are you really here? How are you? And that kind of personal connection, even if remotely, I personally think goes a long way.
I do too, especially, I don't think whether the students realize it now or not, but they need that sense of connection now more than ever. So that's something that if you're pushing, that I think whether they show it or not is for their benefit. I feel, especially in architecture school, the level of, let's say, like standards can be considered a bit lower now. Like if we're not exactly meeting in person, they're having that pressure of, I need to be pinup ready. Like I want to show my work. I want to actually show it to people. And in a sense now, like being behind a screen, people can kind of fall or like stoop to a different level. And by you trying to appease that level, it just helps in this sense, I was grateful. My last semester got cut short due to COVID, my last semester of undergraduate. But I was very nervous, even just thinking about now the students going through still a whole other year of architecture school, not in not in person fully, which creates its own set of issues. But I'm glad to hear that you're working towards the positive turn.
We're working through it. That's right.
Which brings me to your design firm, your architecture firm, which you are one of the leading founders of. So why 15? Why the name?
The name is it's actually my initials. So it's my initials in Roman numeral, XV. So that's the number 15 in Roman numerals. But one of the main ideas about 15 is that it really isn't a firm that is about me or is about a singular individual. So I wanted a name that was going to, live well beyond my years and not represent my name. So XVAD, 15 architecture and design. But yes, if you look closely at our logo, it's my initials.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I think something, just doing my homework specifically before this podcast, I see that you and your firm have a very cohesive design ideologies. I see what you guys are striving for. I see your mottos, what you guys are about. Your message and company motto comes across very clear. And I just wanted to talk about, I kind of see your motto split up into 3 core values, which are dialogue, understanding, and empathy. Those are the 3 that I grabbed from reading just off of your website. And I think those 3 words do go a long way in talking about the design process. So the first is dialogue, and you guys are very known for that dialogue between the different disciplines. Mm-hmm. What are some examples of different types of dialogue that you guys use throughout your day, either in the office or, specifically in the office?
First of all, I'm very impressed by your research.
That's very good. But even just reading like 2 or 3, like your simple summary and what you're about, I was able to grasp your full understanding of what you guys really are thinking. So kudos. That's really cool. Yeah, that's really cool. I thank you for that.
Yeah, so dialogue really important, and I actually pair that, directly with transparency and wanting to offer everybody in the company access to the information, that we all have. I mean, certainly there are certain things that the principals will have access to at a business level that isn't necessary for everybody to know or discuss. But generally, keeping everybody up to speed on like what are the projects we're pursuing, why, how are we doing financially this year? What are the targets? How are we doing against those? Why are we taking on a job? Why are we not taking on a job? And being really open and transparent about those things really helps the entire team like feel like a part of it and make sure that everybody's not saying like, why are we doing this?
Exactly. You're thinking like a teacher in a sense. And it's very effective. It's very effective though, in the sense that by informing everybody, knowledge is bliss is what they say. So when people know why they're doing something, it just helps them want to do it more.
I think that's right. And it comes from my experience, at previous firms where I think if you don't have access to that information, then you don't feel like you have the power to affect or to impact because you don't know. And so then you start to, without meaning to, effectively like disengage, and that's something that I've seen. And I think that was one of the key challenges for us with COVID and not being together in the office is how do we continue to communicate in that way that becomes a lot less, it was very fluid, because I'm in the office when we win a project and everybody's like screaming and we have champagne in the refrigerator, and now like we win a project and like someone has to call me and say, hey, we won this project. And I'm like, oh, great, let's call the team. It's 10 steps.
Yeah, 10 more steps than what you were used to. Yeah. But I think your key and effective dialogue and conversation helped you guys out in the long run in this talk.
Oh, definitely. And we're using tools, like Slack and others to try to stay connected. But we're looking forward also to being together again. But at the end of the day, it's really a philosophy of, I always say like over communicating and always inviting everybody to say, if they're really not sure why we're doing something, then ask the question and I'm happy to share.
Well, I think that also it doesn't give people any excuses anymore. If you're given all the tools that is necessary, so why haven't we come up with a solution? Everyone does know the problem. So
I like the way you think, Natalia.
That can be used in both directions.
Exactly. It makes a team, a true team.
Right. So one of my other questions that I had here was how has dialogue changed, through technology? But we had just kind of covered that as far as different methods like Slack and, we're using Skype now and Zoom. Right. I was just wondering if there's any other tools that you guys have used.
We've maybe this year, I think we just started this year, realizing that this was still not over, right? Mm-hmm. And we still had a long way to go. We did begin to do a daily huddle, and that's at 9:45. We all get together, as many of us as possible. I mean, sometimes someone's on site, but even so, we encourage people to call in no matter where they are. And we just check in for 15 minutes, and it's not really about like, what are you doing? But it's more about like, do you need anything today? We try to solve problems that would take 20 phone calls, like, right away. Or at minimum, we could say, hey, like the two of us have to talk, or there's a conflict in the schedule, or hey, I learned a cool trick yesterday. So we try to use this. Sometimes it's just to check in. How's everybody doing? But every single day we meet, and I think that's actually made us stronger because it doesn't go very long before we've all at least seen each other on camera.
Right, and I think what are some effective communication techniques that you use would be just a simple check-in every day helps. Like every hour, every 2 hours, something that helps your people kind of have that benchmark to move throughout the day, right? Mm-hmm.
And on Slack, it's pretty effective that way, I found, because you're not necessarily like calling someone in the middle of their thinking stream. You're at least like, posting
right.
something.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So being known for your engagement in the process and the collaboration between your clients and within your own office, who would you say is your clientele? Do you have a specific target audience, or are you? Yeah, I guess explain your clientele.
Sure.
How you find.
Mm-hmm. We found a great client in a lot of the universities, I would say. I think they really get what we're doing, and from our perspective, they understand the process. They also, universities tend to have a challenging sometimes decision-making process, and we help them with that. We help them see answers to their questions, fairly quickly, so that they can move on to the next level of decision making. So we do really enjoy working with universities, and we have a number of university clients. I personally, of course, love being in academia, so put me in a group of scholars every day, any day, and I'm happy, right? So we have a number of clients there. When we founded the company, we had a lot of experience in the corporate world, and that's definitely something that we'll continue to pursue, because those clients give us access sometimes to resources that other clients might not have. But we did have a goal of doing more work in Philadelphia, which is our home, and to doing more work with non-for-profits and kind of mission-driven community organizations. And through, I think, our efforts in networking and connecting and getting our name out there, we've been really fortunate to do quite a bit of work for Public Health Management Corporation, which has a number of locations throughout the city with pretty broad reach in both behavioral, mental health, outpatient facilities, and bringing design and good design to those spaces has been a real joy. So it wasn't necessarily a client we sought out, but it was definitely a client that has reach and is located in communities that need a lot of resources. And the fact that we can bring some good quality design to those communities has been really a treat.
Right. So the forefront of your thinking and design thinking is kind of kind of giving back, but in the sense that you want to create these built environments that inspire these certain group of people, whether they're going through a specific thing, whether that be academia or whether that be health services. So you're trying to inspire something through that, whether that be for hope. And okay, so I do that. There's an underlying tie between the products that you do. So when collaborating with these different people from different backgrounds, I was trying to see how you specifically bring the best out of each of these different characters. And I think you kind of said it before, so your same passion of academia, maybe?
I have a brief anecdote, and you'll have to tell me how much time we have. But I think specifically talking about interdisciplinary collaboration. So when I was at Penn, getting ready for the summer, thinking about an internship, looking for an internship in an architecture firm that seemed like what I should be doing. I got an email in my inbox coming from the Museum of Archaeology, looking for architects to go and spend a summer in Greece, drawing rocks, ancient rocks, that is. And it was it was due that day. I filled out the application. I made a few phone calls, and I got it in. And I got it. I got to go to Greece that summer to an archaeological dig to draw rocks. But what I didn't realize at all is that the director of the program, Dr. David Gilman Romano, is really a true collaborator. And he was not interested in just going and digging up goods and putting them in a museum. He wanted to really broadcast the history of the site. And so he had invited a huge group of best in kind researchers, a bunch of PhDs from the University of Arizona and from UPenn. And so I was surrounded for, I guess, 8 weeks with experts in soils, in bones, in plant species, landscape architects. There were people who were experts in religious and cults, in mythology.
Wow.
And we were all there to kind of find out the story of this place. And I bet it's really...
Sorry to jump, but I bet he purposely invited all these different people. He wanted all the different perspectives of all these different minds, which I think is a beautiful thing.
Absolutely. No, that's right on. And then like thinking about like just the different perspectives of like, well, why did these people settle here? So there was a village where we were staying. It's like, where did these people settle here? And, as an architect, I could be like, well, the solar exposure, or we're protected because we're in a valley, or like, whatever. I could come up with my ideas. And then someone else would come and be like, well, no, actually, there's a earthquake fault line here, and that's, that has some kind of meaning. And then there's these springs, and water is at the center of like these mythological cults. Obviously, it has to be here. And so you start like peeling the onion, understanding the layers. And there's multiple reasons why they should have settled the site there that maybe had nothing to do with solar exposure. For me, it was and I kept going back. I've been involved with the project for many, many, many years. And actually, I've sent a bunch of my students now to participate in the project. But I think that has always stuck with me. And so at 15, we have this arm of collaborators. And right now we're working on a few collaborations where we're going to bring in, occupational therapists, industrial designers, artists, psychologists, all to collaborate on a number of projects that, at the crux of it, they're just quite complex, and we need their expertise.
Right. It's kind of like a lot of chefs in the kitchen type of deal. So speaking about like when putting together big projects like this where you have a lot of collaboration going on, going into these things, do you know that they're going to work 100%, or is it kind of like taking that chance of things will kind of work out in a way that's that beauty of it? I'm not sure if you kind of know that going into things.
I've gained a certain level of understanding that things always do work out, and I do take risks, and I think that's gotten me to where I am. Calculated risks, right? A certain level of risk, and if it doesn't work, I also am a firm believer on, okay, well, let's try it again. So I have to admit, like, some of these collaborations haven't been easy, like we bring them to the client and the client's like, like, I don't, why am I going to pay for more bodies? And so then we look at ways to like fund it that maybe isn't related to the project, or, we work around it. So no, I'm never afraid that it might not work. I'm more just thinking, well, if this one doesn't work, what are we going to do next?
No, that's a good way to put it, because I was going to ask you, like, your experiences with like wanting to have that effective, positive change. Like, but we're here to talk about those risks and talk about the negative changes that also happen along the way. You don't just get a positive result. You need a lot of negatives before you get to that positive. So that's where we're also here to celebrate those risks.
That's exactly right. And I think that's a good takeaway. Like, don't be afraid to either make mistakes or not get it right, the first time. And I tell my students who were like me, were, so stressed out about getting their first internship in architecture. And it's like, well, if it doesn't work, then work with a furniture maker, or work in construction, or work with an artist, or even if you don't have access to that, then work at a supermarket. But always be like, working towards the next thing and the next step. And no, you're not always going to get it right. And we've had, a number of false starts, and then we try again. But there's only one way to move, and that is forward.
That is very true. In a positive direction always moves forward.
Right.
So I also noticed that, like, you were also a person that, like, if you're not in a space of learning, it's kind of time to move on. Like, you're always, exactly, you always want to be learning. I think is something that someone can take away from you and your personality. So going into like the second part of one of your core values is understanding. To understand communication, to create environments for people. We have to kind of understand how us as humans work and the human experience. So how do you, I guess, value human experience? Just the word experience. What comes to your mind, and how dear do you hold that in your design process?
Maybe strangely, the first thing that comes to my mind is that we're all very different, and that we're all going to have very different experiences, or even experience things in a very different way. So I think we have to be very, very careful not to imagine that what we crafted or created is going to create a particular result in everybody. But I do think that there are some like core, maybe core values or core things that really can benefit, like, I think, all human beings. Like like access to nature and to daylight, right? Or I think some people don't even notice when they're in a space, but how the space is lit. Or, I think there are certain like qualities of a space that are universally good for everyone, right? We make sure that we bring those to the table. In terms of crafting experiences for people, I think that's where like empathy really comes in. It's putting yourself in the shoes of someone else. And I don't know why, but I learned that like really early on in life, and I think it must have been my mother. But that's something that we always, put kind of at the forefront. So who are these people that we're designing this space for, and what are their needs? And they could be really different from ours, right? And we're about to start a project for the Center for Autism. And I think that's going to be a tremendous challenge. And this is one where we definitely need our collaborators, because designing for a community, a portion of the community that just has very different intake of sensory information, is going to require that we really, really, do our due diligence and learn and talk to the experts. So certainly their experience is going to be different. So how do we pay attention to how they will experience the space?
Right. So like having empathy, kind of learning how to deal with change. I was wondering what does change look like to you? If it's when you hit a certain milestone, because I know change can be different for so many people. So just thinking about like, what do you consider a positive change when you're designing?
Tell me a little bit more. How do you mean?
I guess that was more of a broader question. Thinking, I guess, back to how you say you want to create positive change through your design. What do you mean by, what does change look like? What does that change look like?
So I think it starts by asking a lot of questions and not taking the status quo as a given. So things oftentimes we find, aren't working the way that they should. And so asking the questions of how should it work, and then just against all odds, like make sure that we deliver the way that it should work. Now, I think that I often think about our projects as like small little catalysts, and it doesn't matter how dull the project is. Like, I mean, we do all sorts of projects. Yeah. But even if it's like the renovation of a single classroom, it's a small catalyst. So we'll renovate that classroom, but what about the experience of arriving to that classroom, or when the students are waiting to get into the classroom, or when they leave the classroom, how should they feel? And so then the potential for that as a catalyst to maybe either empower the inhabitants or like start to transform the space around it. So positive change, I think in my mind means we're going to create something that didn't exist before, both from the experience of the individuals who will inhabit it, but then also the neighborhood or even, its close context. How is it an opportunity to change things, to make them better? I think does that kind of answer?
No, that makes perfect sense, because then we're able to tie it back. Okay, you kind of need to know your history before you can make that positive change. It's the learning from those mistakes, from those experiences. And this can kind of be described as your innovative thinking. This is how you think. And this is how you think in the office when you're designing. I was wondering how, because that's a different way to think. And I was wondering how that kind of translates into your maybe personal life. How do you start to think about things when you experience through your own life?
Oh,
I know. I'm getting into it. I love these questions.
It's very good. Let's see. So actually, I'm going to go back in history a little bit to say that I moved to the States when I was 12. I guess for the second time, right? Because we said I was born in White Plains, New York. But I grew up in Chile, and I moved to the States when I was 12. And, fairly uncomfortable situation, like learning to speak the language and trying to fit in culturally. And then after a few years, we moved back to Chile, and I was in high school and kind of had to do it all over again, and then moved back here again to come to college. And so my family moved a lot. And at some point in my life, I think I had a difficult time with change. I would get very upset if things didn't go the way that I wanted them to go. But with time, I think I've learned to embrace that and just say, well, here's my plan for today. Most likely it won't go like I planned, but we're going to go with it, right? And see where the day takes me. But also a check-in. Like I do check in every once in a while and make sure that I didn't take so many diversions, let's say, that I didn't get to the end goal. So allow for some of that flex. And I think that's a hard lesson. It was a hard lesson for me. Like, don't get anxious about it. Allow for that flex. But then do go back and check in and make sure you're still heading in the direction you wanted to head in. I think in terms of our company, we're planners and we do take risks, but they're planned risks to some degree. And I think that goes back to like that business minor. So we have a plan. We have 3-year plan, 5-year plan, 10-year plan, and we're constantly checking against those targets. And we can exceed them, or if we don't meet them, we adjust. But at least having that plan, I think, has helped us be, pretty successful the first few years.
Kind of, I was just actually on listening to a webinar yesterday and was talking about your marketing strategy and like sticking to your motto and how you always have to kind of check in with that motto, make sure you're following, make sure, okay, is my firm following these? Are we who we say we are? And like we change and we adjust. And that's something that you should be doing like often, always checking in to make sure that you're making sure that you're who you say you are and you're sticking to your guidelines and your motto and what you said in the beginning, which I think is good because you do keep the forefront of the human experience always at the top of your mind. That's the number one for me. That's what I put in my cover letters. That's something that I find very similar in the design process. It's something very important, and I think we can agree on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
So 2 more questions I have. Okay. How would you describe your firm's aesthetic as far as visual representation? Whether that be through renderings or maybe your social media pages? Is there a certain go-to line that you say, or is that something that you strive for when visually representing your firm? Because I checked out your Instagram, it's pretty cool, and abstractness in some of the photos is it's different. It's not your typical architecture firm Instagram, which I found was cool.
Yeah, I think the abstract component that actually goes deep in our roots, in the sense that about seeing things not only for just what they are, but also for the possibility of what they can be. And for what else they might inspire, and the fact that you might see it and think of one thing and I might see it and think of another. So not giving it all away, but finding those like hidden moments that contain the DNA of something, but that you could input your experience into it and make it yours. Like that's where that kind of abstraction really comes from. In terms of our aesthetic, and you picked up on it, which is cool. In terms of our aesthetic, I want to say that we're really, again, careful to be very true to our clients. We certainly guide them in the decision making, and we're never going to present something we don't like to them. But we do allow them to bring their personality to the table when we're designing for them. So while we definitely have a design sensibility and a design aesthetic, which I think it's contemporary, it's fresh, it's dynamic. I think it's also kind of simple and classic, but we also want the client to put in their splash of color in there. We'll work within our parameters, but we definitely want to make sure that it feels theirs when they're in it.
Correct.
Like we collaborated with them, but we didn't it's not like that show where like the people appear and their house has been done and surprised.
Yep, exactly. No, you're working with them every step of the way. They're invested in that process, and it's very evident through your work. So I have one last question for you.
Sure.
If you had to give yourself advice, your former student self advice now, what would it be? Go back when you were in school. What's something you would say to yourself?
My student self. I'm going to go to a place where it was, I think, between like being a student and maybe the very early years of my career. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So I think at that time, I was quite impatient in that I was frustrated that I didn't know everything, and I wanted to know everything right away. And I've 15 years practicing. I don't know everything, but I have developed a certain level of patience with both myself, but also the profession, that there's just so much to learn, and that maybe that's the beauty of it. So like, take a deep breath, Ximena, just give yourself time, absorb everything that's in front of you, and remember that most likely everyone else in the room has been there before and understands you don't know something, and will be happy to share with you, what that is. And looking back, like the amount of things I've learned over the last 15 years, I couldn't have even dreamed of or imagined. And I was so stressed out and so anxious that I didn't know everything, and that people were going to think that I didn't know anything. And I think if I could now tell myself, hey, you're going to learn it all. It just takes a really long time. And for now, ask for help if you don't know the question, and no one's going to judge you. I think that probably would have been helpful at that time. I probably wouldn't have believed myself, but
listening to you now just gives me hope, and I hear you, and I'm in those shoes now. So I appreciate every word that you give to us, because we're here to have that open conversation about those doubts and worries, and to encourage other kids and students who are watching this that there is that light at the end of the tunnel.
Absolutely, and take on every opportunity that comes your way, and don't be afraid that it's going to take you away from your end goal, because what I found is that it will enrich and it will change your end goal for the better. If I was so set on having an opportunity in an architecture internship, but if I hadn't gone to Greece and I hadn't experienced what I experienced, then I probably have a pretty different outlook. So allow those things to change you back to change, right? And then checking in though, and making sure that it's still aligned. If somehow that took you to being a pastry chef and that's not where you wanted to end up, then hurry up, quit that, and get back on track.
Absolutely. One last question before you go. If you can just give out places for people to reach you, either your firm's website or your Instagram handle.
Perfect. Yeah, so you can definitely reach us at xvadesign.com, and all of our emails are there. So you can find me, and you can find anybody on my team. And please do reach out, because we love the conversation, and we love to hearing what you're up to.
I just want to thank you guys for watching. This has been another episode of A Student's Perspective.